Today's video, we're gonna talk about standard versus account default goals on Google Ads. What's the difference and how does it affect your profitability? Okay, so there's something called a standard goal when you set up a conversion goal inside your Google Ads account, and there's something called an account default goal. There are two separate things, okay, which the name by itself doesn't really tell you a lot about what it is, which is why I wanted to make this video here today, just to be a resource for people trying to figure this out for themselves. Of course, Google has their own documentation. This is going to go well beyond that in terms of how it actually makes you money or loses you money, depending on the wrong or right decisions you do with it. Also with understanding how these choosing one or the other here will affect how your campaigns run, which is something Google does not tell you or say anything about. So I'm going to go into detail on this video, as well as some different campaigns where we ran where this actually blew up in our face. So you don't make the same kind of decisions for yourself. Okay, before I get into the explanation and all this though, if you do not know who I am Corey Zyman, owner of Guaranteed PPC, an online advertising agency that specializes in guaranteeing results for their clients. That is, we do not charge our clients management fees until we can get them a certain minimum lift in their profitability, basically in excess of the management fees that we charge. We're the only agency out there who offers any kind of similar management offer or guarantee, which should tell you something about the quality of the information on this video. So with that said, getting into the content here. Standard goals, okay, just to let you know, are used for doing campaign-specific goal settings. You could set up a conversion goal in your Google Ads account under the conversion menu, and that can apply to all campaigns in your account. I actually recently had a commenter here on this channel ask, hey, do you need conversion goals for every campaign? No, you do not. You set up one. If every campaign is going to be able to optimize for the same thing, you set up one conversion goal for the account, which could be technically standard or an account default goal, and with that, you could apply it to all your campaigns. You wouldn't need to have a separate goal for each campaign, just to state the obvious up front. But with that said, if you have different goals that you want to optimize for on different campaigns, let's say you have an account where you're promoting two different sites. Well, at that point in time, you would want the campaigns that promote one site to optimize for one goal, and the campaigns for another that market another site, another goal. You could go into the goal settings of each set of campaigns and select the goals that you want to work with. And when you go into the goal settings, it allows you to choose the account default goal or let you select your own goals, if you will. So you could just optimize for effectively different things on different campaigns. If you don't want to optimize for different goals on different campaigns, then by setting up a conversion goal in your account as an account, quote unquote, account default goal, and with each campaign set up in the goal settings itself, when you go to settings and then the goal settings, you set it up and where it's set to account default goal, all the campaigns by default will just optimize for all the goals in your conversion menu that are set up as account default goals, if that makes sense. So realistically, it's an account default goal is meant to signify or set up goals that you're going to want used by more than one campaign in your account, or basically all of them, just to be simple about it, or to make this simple. Whereas standard goals, you're setting that up to optimize for something specific that one campaign should optimize for versus another. And there's a bunch of different scenarios where you would want to do that. Marketing two different sites is just one of them, but also some occasions where I talk about a waterfall strategy that we use at our agency, where initially you're going to optimize for like form fills and phone calls, and then eventually qualified leads that the phone calls and form fills you got that were qualified, and then eventually you're going to optimize for sales, and then eventually you're going to optimize for profit, and then you go from one to the next, given that you won't have enough profit data to optimize effectively your campaigns off of that data alone. So you start off optimizing for form fills and phone calls by itself, and while still building up the other back-end conversion data that you want to eventually optimize for. And in that case where you're going to switch from optimizing for form fills and phone calls to qualified leads, because it's going to cause volatility in your account, I often say, and what we will do here at our agency is we'll just switch one campaign at a time, the campaign goal settings. So in that campaign by campaign, we'll make the switch optimizing from one action to another action so that the results in our overall account don't too far down before we go forward again. Because everything in Google Ads is much like building muscle. You're ripping your muscle down and then it builds it back stronger. And you're ripping it. Every time you make a change, you're going to go a little backwards before you go forwards, even switching from one goal set to another. So that's a more common situation where we use goals, to have optimized for different things on different campaigns. And, ultimately, we will set up different goals that we're optimizing for each campaign. Even though itself, we have the form fills and phone calls set up as an account default goal itself. You can actually, on a campaign where you don't want to optimize for a phone call and form fill, you just go into the goal settings and select the goal that you want itself. So having a goal set up as an account default goal doesn't mean you have to use it for all campaigns. It just makes it easy to apply it to all campaigns. Just want to make that clear. And then also with standard goals, usually they're used for tracking leads or offline conversions, specifically qualified leads. So the reason for that is because you basically, and this is also just not true all the time, but usually the number one thing that you want to optimize for is sales revenue. So what people will do is have their goals that track, let's say, time on site, 2 minutes or more, or, people who have requested an ebook as a secondary thing that you want them to do on a landing page. They'll set those up as standard goals because that's not the ultimate goal of the campaign they're running. So they'll just set it up as a secondary, whereas the default, what you're really going for is sales. And so they'll just set those goals up as secondary. Now, for that matter, again, it's not always that way. And also, so to say, generally speaking, like what we'll have at our agency is we will optimize for stuff that is not a sale, but correlated with sales, because we're going to get data quicker. With that said, if you will, I'm going to mark the form fills and phone calls and, ebook downloads and all that as an account default goal right away, if you will. And eventually, I'll just simply set up when I eventually optimize for sales revenue by itself, then I'll just set up and leave that particular goal that tracks sales revenue as an account default goal, and then I'll mark the other goals secondary and also a non-standard goal itself. Or just go into the goal settings of each campaign and then unselect the form fills and all that, the non-purchase goals, if you will. When I set up a goal to track, like if we're doing let's say we're working with a architectural firm that serves people, and we're tracking whether the leads turn into a sale or not. And so we're tracking the lead coming in on the front end. We're also tracking whether the lead's qualified or not itself as a secondary goal. And then we're also tracking sales. Generally speaking with that, we'll track phone calls and form fills as the account default goal, but we'll track whether the lead is qualified or not as a standard goal in secondary, which secondary doesn't, as per Google's own definitions, they don't attribute that or count that as used for steering of your campaigns. Eventually, when we want to use that qualified lead data, when we've racked up, at least 30, if not 100 of these qualified leads that where we took the lead, made sure it was qualified, passed that information back into our goal that tracks qualified leads, then we'll eventually itself mark that, make that an account default goal and mark that goal primary, and then mark the goals that are not for tracking qualified leads, but just tracking leads coming in general, phone calls and form fills. We'll mark those goals secondary. So we'll flip-flop it, and we'll mark those goals non-account default, if that makes sense. One thing I've noticed is you certainly don't want to mark your goals when you're tracking leads on the front end, and you're also tracking whether those leads are qualified. If you're not having enough data to utilize that qualified lead data goal or goal that is set up to track qualified leads, if you don't have enough data, you mark it secondary, and you also mark it as a standard goal, not an account default goal, because Google will actually utilize it for bidding anyway. Even though they say if it's marked secondary, they won't utilize that data. I found that out, which I'm going to talk about here in a minute. But with that said, before I get into account default goals here, everything is so touchy with Google Ads anymore. You have to understand, all the changes that are coming out, and it takes so much time to just track all of it. The best thing you can do if you don't want to hire an ad agency is just to watch this channel, subscribe to it, because I'm going to go over the high-level stuff that you need to know from somebody who's an actual practitioner. Most of the channels you see on YouTube are people that are content creators. They're not managing ads. It's their full-time job. The information's basically BS. I hear people that are in the know that actually manage ads themselves say this all the time to me because it's true. So if you want to make serious money with ads, subscribe to this channel already, because you're not going to find better information than you're going to find here on this channel on other channels, as well as online. You should also, while you're at it, if you like the channel already, check out my blog on my site at guaranteeppc.com/blog. The blog has step-by-step instructions to be able to use the strategies we're using at our firm to guarantee results for our clients as well, for your advantage. But with that said, getting back to what I was mentioning here, count default goals now. Now, these are used for doing goal setting on multiple campaigns at once, like I mentioned before. So if you expect that you're going to use these goals on all campaigns, the easiest thing to do would be just to mark them as an account default goal, because you can easily apply them to all campaigns at once, versus having to go on each campaign in the goal settings and hand select there the goal that you want to actually optimize for. Or should I say goals if it's more than one. But with that, here's a very key thing. This is what prompted me to make this video in the first place, was even with goals marked in secondary, which again, Google has primary and secondary goal status. You mark a goal in primary, it's supposed to be Google utilizes that for steering of your campaigns. If it's in secondary, it's not. But what we found out recently was we had an e-commerce account where we had a particular set of goals marked as a qualified lead offline conversion goal versus a converted lead offline conversion goal, which the difference between those two are leads that were qualified versus turned into a sale. And we wanted to fix this situation by creating another goal that would track offline sales and have it set up as a converted lead versus a qualified lead, like we should have had in the first place. But it was 8 years ago when we set up these campaigns, and things have changed since then. We marked those two goals in secondary that track offline sales that came through the phone that would add to the sales that we tracked through the cart tracking goal that we have. Because those two new goals were set up as an account default goal, the results that we would get on our PMAX campaign in particular went way down and then very erratic, started getting a bunch of low quality clicks on the display network and so forth. And what this told me was Google utilizes more than what they say the account default goal for, which are the account default goal versus standard goal. They say is just to help you apply one goal to multiple campaigns easier. But realistically, they're utilizing it as like a goal ranking system, like what goal is more important than another, as I found through this experiment here. So what I found is if you have like an e-commerce site like what we have, going back to the architectural firm, if you're tracking qualified leads, in addition to leads that just come in, phone calls, form fills itself, you want to have your offline goals that you set up to track whether the leads are qualified or not only in secondary, but as a standard goal, not an account default goal, because Google is still going to use that data for steering of the campaigns, even if it's marked in, those goals are marked in secondary itself. Why Google is doing this, I don't know, but this is in reality what happens to the accounts that we're working with. If a goal is marked in secondary because you're not utilizing it, you should also mark it as a standard goal basically at the same time, just to keep this simple, if you will. You mark goals secondary when you're not ready to use that data because you haven't racked up enough conversion data to use it or do it, or you're using secondary goals for creating custom conversion goals, which I'm going to make a video directly following this as well, where if you have a multi-step form and you want people who finish the form but answer questions in a certain way while they are going through the form process to be the ultimate conversion, such as somebody who says they have $1 million to spend and they completed the form, that be your ultimate conversion versus somebody who just filled out the form itself in and itself. And with custom conversion goals, you can say both of those things had to have happened. So that would be one situation where you would have goals marked secondary in effort to set up the best results with your Google Ads as possible. But definitely make goals that you have marked in secondary standard goals so that Google does not utilize that for your bidding and the goal that tracks the leads coming in by itself, form fills and phone calls, I'll track them, have both of them in primary and both with an account default status. Why? Because it's not going to double count that much. But if 50% of the leads are qualified, I'm going to have the qualified leads in secondary until I have enough data built up to just mark that primary, and then along with it, take it from standard to account default goal itself, and then take the leads, the goal that tracks leads by itself, revert that to secondary, and then have it also changed into a standard goal from an account default goal, if that makes sense. And generally speaking, you need, if you're tracking qualified leads, you're going to want at least 30 qualified leads, if not 100 plus. And if you're going to switch to optimizing for and use a goal that tracks sales, you're typically going to want to, at least on a lead generation campaign, want a few hundred conversions as per what I found. For that matter, I'm going to, given that the standard and account default setting does more than allow you to more conveniently add a goal to a certain campaign, because it does more than that now. All right. So if you want somebody to hook you up with the right campaigns and settings and conversion tracking and all that to help you make tons of money with your ads, this is what I do for clients. You can reach out to me at guaranteedppc.com and I'll help you with that. And I can guarantee you a certain amount of results. I also offer campaign templates. So ultimately, if we've worked in your niche market before, we can give you the winning ads, landing pages, all of it that work for your niche market and for a client in a different city or country than you, and you could use it for yourself in your own market. We've worked in over 100 different niche markets, so the chances are quite high we've got the exact results you're looking for already with the template, and then can tell you the results you're going to get with it up front. We've got people using these templates to start basically like a business, another business, just to diversify their income because the templates work so good. And the hardest part about getting a business started most of the time, account default goal setting, anytime my goal is marked in primary to keep this simple, and then standard goals if my goal is also marked in secondary, because they kind of almost overlap in what they do, if you will. The exception being here, different campaigns that need to optimize for different goals. And in that case, I'm going to make all the goals standard goals, and I'm going to set up the goal selection on the campaign level via the goal settings on each campaign individually, given that each of these campaigns are actually maybe sending people to different websites or even different landing pages that have different, like one is a standard contact form, one is a multi-step form, something like that. If you want somebody that will just manage your ads for free, by the way, and pay for your ad spend, I got a golden offer for you. We do this for clients that are for, and most companies don't want to do it because they don't want to pay a percentage of their sales. But I could tell you that, we're going to do to your ads is going to be at least 3 times more than what you're going to do for yourself, because this is all I do. You can't beat somebody who spends 40 hours a week doing ad strategy and then 30 hours a week on the weekends talking about it and or analyzing it. You're just not going to beat me at this and coming up with the best strategy for your business. So yes, you will take more or less of a cut on your overall profit in your company, but you're going to have a pie that's 3 to 10 times larger than what you would have had otherwise. And so it's advantageous for you to do that, because you're going to get the best of the best of the best person you can hire, truly working on your stuff. If you're interested in that, reach out to me at my firm as well at guaranteedppc.com. I also have a brand new Discord group that I came out with a free PPC course that I personally made in there, which is fantastic. You could go ahead and visit that if you're interested as well. But I'm going to wrap it up with that. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you on the next one.
Remember when I said conversion goal was important during this video? Well, this video here tells you how to do it.